Hi, everybody. My name is John Ziola. We're going to be doing a policy as code workshop today. This is going to be a lot of fun. So just quick setup instructions. Make sure that you're all logged into an AWS account. We are going to require an AWS account for this because we're going to use some AWS native services, specifically Cloud9. So make sure that you have that and you're all logged in. If you want to chat with us at all, Discord is going to be the place to do it. In there, there's a workshop discussions channel. So go ahead and jump down to there. You should see a message from me, hi, at here with a waving hand. So that is the right place. And it is 11:30 a.m. Eastern time. I know there's been a little bit of confusion lately worldwide with the time zone changes outside of the US. So right now it is 11:30 and we're gonna get things started. So this is the Mastering Policy as Code workshop. My name is John Ziola. I am the CTO and co-founder of a company called CISO. I am also a SAN certified instructor for the Sec 540 class. So that's cloud security and DevSecOps automation. I live in this world of policy as code, cloud native security. I'm working with technical software companies as a part of my day job and helping them pass really rigorous audits, right? When you're working with highly regulated industries like healthcare, finance, or the government, it's very common to get audited a lot or to need to pass these compliance frameworks like FedRAMP if you're working with the government, or CMMC if you're a sub to a prime. Or if you're just working with other regulated industries, you might need HITRUST or HIPAA or ISO 27001 SOC 2. All of those programs have a long list of requirements. What policy as code is going to let us do is automate away some of those requirements and replace meetings with automation. That's why I love it, because I'm not a huge fan of meetings. So that's what we're going to be covering today. A little bit more about myself. I'm based out of Pittsburgh. I'm a local event organizer. So if you've ever been to B-Sides Pittsburgh, I'm one of the organizers of that. I would love to have you if you are nearby or want to take a flight. I also run a group called Still City InfoSec. I run the CNCF's Cloud Native Security Pittsburgh event, which is actually more of like a global event, but it is technically called Cloud Native Security Pittsburgh. And I run a thing called PitSec. I'm a CNCF ambassador, all kinds of fun things I do with my time. This is, I think, the closest picture to actually looking like me that I was able to find. So what we are going to do is, because this lab has a bit of a setup requirements, it'll take about, I ran it this morning, and luckily I did because we had some upstream changes I had to make. It takes about 15 minutes to set up. So what I'm going to do is we're going to walk through the whole thing together. So please, if you could all just get logged into your AWS accounts, we'll do a walkthrough. Then I'm going to jump back into some slides while that stuff's running in the background. Once that finishes, should be about the time that we're done with our slides, and you'll be able to jump right in. This workshop is planned to go for about 2 hours. So about 1:30 p.m. is when we will wrap things up Eastern. But if it goes later than that, just throw me a message in Discord and I'll be around a little bit after that as well. So let's start with a bit of a lab walkthrough. So first thing, if you want to find where the lab is, you go to johnziola.com/workshop. So if you go to johnziola.com/workshop, it should redirect you to my policy as code one, because that's the most recent lab that I'm running. We've got some introductory information here, and then we've got our getting started. And you can see right here, very important, this lab expects that you have a Cloud9 environment configured. Well, you might not have that. So if you click this first link, this is what we're going to do. So if I can just pop this open real quick. So from scratch at the AWS console, the first thing we're going to do is search for Cloud9 and click the first one. So Cloud9, click that. And you'll see I've got a couple backups and some recent tests and things like that. But I'm going to make a new environment from scratch, just like you all are. So we're going to click this create environment at the top. and we're going to name it. So I'm going to call it the policy as code workshop. Now, most of this you can leave default, but we do need to bump up the server size a little bit. So we're going to click this additional instance types, and we're going to type T3, and we're going to get this T3x large server, right? So the other thing that we want to do, just go back to our instructions here. So we did that and that. We also want to change our timeout. So if you spend more than 30 minutes reading some of the lab instructions, your server might shut down. We don't want that. So we're going to bump that up to 4 hours. That means that if you don't use this Cloud9 environment for 4 hours, it's going to shut your server down. You could start it back up afterwards, but it's going to shut it down, save you a couple bucks. At the end of this, I've got some instructions on how to clean everything up, but this will just make sure it doesn't shut down in the middle. And then we're done. We're going to hit create at the bottom. So you should start seeing this creating policy as code workshop or whatever you named it. And you've got this new item right here with that name and an open button. So if we just keep following our instructions, we should go back here. You should have creating, and we want to click that open button. So it's probably not going to be ready yet, right? So we're going to stall for a minute here while it creates this environment. And eventually it's going to look a little bit something like this, right? So you'll have very VS Code feeling IDE environment. We've got the files on the left, like the file structure. We've got the actual file contents in the middle. So if you open any of these up, it'll pop up here. And then we've got a terminal at the bottom. We're going to use that terminal. So if we go back to the lab instructions, we've gotten past this important box, and now we've got these couple things to do. And this is what's going to take about 15 minutes. So first we need to export this variable. So what we're going to be doing, we want to be locked down as much as possible. So if you click this go here button, you'll see that it's going to give you an IP address. We want to take that IP address, go into our cloud environment, which should be up and running by now. Like I said, it's pretty quick. And at the bottom, we're going to run this export client IP equals that. All right. So another thing you could do is you could just press this copy button, paste it over here, and we just hit backspace and put that IP address in, right? All right, that's very important because we're going to set up some firewall rules to only allow your IP to access this system. So that's the first step. The second step was we need to run this container, and we should just be able to copy, put it over here, hit paste. Don't forget to hit enter. And then a whole bunch of stuff is going to start scrolling past the screen. It's going to do all kinds of different setups. So after it pulls things down, which takes about a minute and a half or so, if you didn't set up the client IP properly, it should fail right away, right? So it won't let you go on if you left those, if you didn't set the client IP address. But if you did set the client IP address, it'll start going through the lab setup. At the end, you'll see something like this, some login credentials. We're going to have a GitLab server. We're going to have a few different components, 53 things. We're done in this infrastructure as code. And you can see if it starts to look like this, things are going good. It's generating some key pairs. And down here, it's actually running an Ansible playbook, right? So if you're having any issues with this, feel free to let me know. This is where we wanted to get to. And you'll just see things scrolling and scrolling and scrolling. And I've been testing this a lot. I ran it 3 or 4 times this morning, and it's very consistent. But if you have any issues in your environment, we can help you troubleshoot that. So that's going to run for about 15 minutes, right? It's going to install some servers, some CI/CD automation, pull a couple of dependencies together, etc. So we're going to go into some slides here, and then we'll jump back into terminology, and we'll kind of let everybody go through the rest of this lab. Right? All right, so that is the lab walkthrough. Today, we are here to talk about policy as code, but in order to talk about policy as code, I think we first need to talk about governance. That's actually good. LUK foreman, that is intentional. So that should go to about 26 or 25 retries, and then it should be successful and it should move on. So unfortunately, you can't get that failed message out of there, but we're just pulling GitLab over and over and over until it's happy and ready. And it's called a readiness probe. And so we're iterating through a readiness probe, and that should turn to good and then move on. Yeah. Trust me, I tried to get that failed message to go away, but wasn't able to do it. Okay, great. So we need to talk about governance before we talk about policies. Okay, awesome. Good deal. In governance, we are describing how we want to make decisions, right? Governance is a way to describe decision-making at a company. And you'll often see something along the lines of this. You might have some principles or some North Stars as a company. You might have pillars or whatever your company calls them, these very high-level items. Then in order to align with those high-level items, maybe their goals even, you will have policies. These are could be Word documents, PDF, Markdown files. These are just words that explain what we want our organization to do. We want to encrypt all of our sensitive data. That would be an example of something that a policy would say. But then there's all these other types of governance, and you can see as we get on the pyramid, they get a little bit bigger. We've got standards, which are saying how we're going to encrypt it. Maybe we encrypt all sensitive data, and sensitive data is defined as this. And the way that we encrypt it is we allow AES-GCM, right? Or we allow RSA with specific key sizes. When we get into those specifics, that's kind of more of a technical standard. The policy is just we encrypt sensitive information. The standard is what does sensitive mean? How do we encrypt? But it's not as granular as take step A, step B, and step C. That's more of kind of a procedural item, which you can see down here. As you flow down through your governance, you might have guidelines, procedures, baselines, which are could be required or not, but all build towards these principles and policies that your organization has. So that is your organizational governance. How does that relate to policies? So like I said before, I'm a member of the CNCF. I'm a CNCF ambassador, and I participate in the policy working group as well as the technical advisory group on security. And in that working group, we recently just published a Kubernetes governance document. So I've got it linked at the bottom here. This is also in the lab instructions. So if you'd like to read the whole thing, you can. But in the cloud native world and in cloud environments, governance works a little bit differently. We've got the same pyramid or triangle, but we've got these different layers that kind of are needed to consider across the different principles, policies, standards, and things like that, right? But what do all those things mean, right? So over here we had runtime, develop, distribute. What are those things actually? And so here we're pulling from another CNCF white paper called the Cloud Native Security White Paper, and specifically version 2 of that, where we describe what all of those stages are. We've got development. This is where your developers are writing code. They might be on their laptops, and they would like to get something functionally on their system. You can see we're using containers and Docker files and infrastructure as code and all these great things, but it starts on the developer's laptop. After developing, we need to distribute that. So we're going to take what worked on their laptop, we're going to open a pull request, do something in a pipeline, we're going to build some code. We're going to make a container, we might store that somewhere, or we have some compiled code, put that somewhere different. We might want to sign all these artifacts. We then need to deploy, so we're going to have runtime policies, and this is where policy as code really starts to kick up, although it applies to all of these stages. We'll do some validation of the signatures and the integrity checks that we made before, and then we've got things running. right? So we went from writing code to running code, which is really what we need to bring business value, right? We need to update the software. So we deploy things to a running environment, and we need to ensure our policies are being enforced there as well. So governance says, how do we make decisions as a company? Policies on their own are one specific layer of a governance stack. And then policy as code is a way to write code to enforce those policies. So as you go through the deployment, development, distribution, and runtime stages of writing software and running systems, we add in this automatic policy, right? Because before policy as code, what would we do? We would have meetings, we would have conversations, we'd talk to developers, scrum masters, product leaders, and say, these are our requirements. And a lot of times there'd be back and forth. There'd be conversation about why is that a requirement? You'd have to go back to the governance. You might have to review some contracts. Like, oh, this one big client of ours requires that we do this one special thing. It needs to be everywhere. Great. So does that apply to this project? Yes or no? And then give that back to the development team. Yes. In order to comply with this contract, you need to do X. Policy as code replaces that conversation with automation. And what we're going to see in the upcoming lab is we can turn that essentially into a red X or a green check without having a meeting. How great, right? So in our governance white paper, we kind of broke the governance conversation up into a bunch of different areas. Specifically, what we're talking about today is security policy as code, but there's other types of policy as code that you might want to consider, right? Costs or financial operations is a really popular one, right? Where we need to know that you're not just going to spend $1 million, right? Having infrastructure as code in a pipeline, the ability to deploy servers in the cloud environment by merging some code. Well, in the pipeline, we probably want to know what it's going to cost before we deploy it. That's a very important part of policy as code. It's just not the focus of today's workshop. So keep that in mind. We are focusing today on security, and everything that we've talked about to this point has been, I think, fairly straightforward, but it's definitely not that straightforward, right? These environments can get fairly complicated. Here, all we're looking at is what we do with the information of policy as code assessments after they've been done. This ignores the whole problem of creating and writing and maintaining policy as code, writing governance, mapping those together, and maintaining those all in sync. That is a huge, huge problem. That is a lot of work. It's very technically difficult, and it's also very new, right? This whole industry and idea of policy as code is extremely novel. What we're looking at here is after that happens, we want to store artifacts, proof that we did this policy enforcement. So when we get asked by an auditor, did you actually do this like your governance says? Did you actually encrypt every single disk of your servers from the beginning before they were deployed, before it was running anything sensitive, before it touched any sensitive data? What we're able to do, and this will be talked about through the workshop, is we're able to show evidence that yes, absolutely yes, we can do that, right? We take these structured artifacts, create and maintain them from every single pipeline run that modifies an environment that we care about, usually production. Then we can overlay a view of that data. We can make a dashboard or something like that, right? And we could say, yes, here, I can show you that we have deployed 100 times to production, and here are 100 files which talk about how we enforce that policy. Would you like us to look at them in any more detail? And you can work with the auditor and demonstrate that. You can give them the assurance that your security program is working. This is very highly related to what you might have seen as with continuous compliance, where we need to be compliant with our organization's requirements and regulations continuously. It's not just a one-time thing. It's not when the audit happens. It's every day, right? We don't want to have this giant sprint right before we're going to get audited and improve our security program and button up all the loose ends and make things look more secure. We want to actually be more secure. We want to stay compliant all the time, right? We don't want to be the front page of the New York Times. We don't want to say, have our company negatively shown in the news because it was compromised. And so what this does is it allows us to oversee our entire security program. But it also does something very important, which is on the risk management and risk acceptance side. By having an overview of all of this complicated stuff, we're able to push to the right person all of the information they need to make a decision, right? If you work in risk management in the past, you've probably been asked to describe why something matters. We've got this critical risk on our risk register. That looks bad. This is scary. So what? I'm a business product owner. I could accept this risk or not, but I don't know if I need to spend the $100,000 in 3 months to fix this or not. Why is this a problem? Well, what all of this evidence gathering does is it allows you to prove that to yourself as well as to external parties and say, here is why that matters. Here is the dashboard. Here's the regulation we may no longer be compliant with. Here are the list of client contracts that we're no longer meeting the expectations of. That's a big risk. And that product owner could decide to do something about it or not to do something about it. Our job is to get them all the context that they need so that they can make the right decision. That's where policy as code really shines. So that takes us to our workshop. So like I said, you can get started at johnziola.com/workshop. You're going to need to be logged into the AWS console, and we're going to be chatting in the cloud Discord, specifically the workshop discussions channel. So if I jump back over here for people, I think we saw 30 people join since I started this. One of the things you want to do as soon as possible is get logged in, and we're going to go to Cloud9. So you can search for Cloud9, click that, come in here, create an environment, give it a name like workshop. We're going to change this, and hit create. This is all in the lab instructions right here as well, if you need to. Then after that, we've got to run 2 commands. And then after we run this command, it's going to run for about 15 minutes. So we want to export our client IP. If you go to this link, you get this IP address. That's the IP you want to use. And then we're going to run this big Docker run command, and it should look something like this. So I did this live, and it worked. Awesome. So you can see I can now log into GitLab here with the username, root, and the password this. This is a unique password to me, and this is also network restricted to only allow access from my IP address. So if you click here, go to open. Everything goes well. We'll see a login page. That's exactly what we expect. I'm going to take this password. I'm going to put root in here, that, and say remember me, and sign in. And I'll get 17 different pop-ups. But we've also got this policy as code demo. You go in here and you should see that it's empty. You're going to need to add an SSH key. And then you're going to push some things to this repository and go through the rest of this lab. All of that is the workshop. So if you start here at terminology, go through a couple items similar to what we just talked about. And we're going to run some code and some steps. Make sure that you take your time and read closely. There are a couple asks as you go. Open this up, take a look around. We need to push this, follow these steps, etc. So just make sure that you're reading closely. Don't just jump down and expect this command to work. But we should see quite a few bit of screenshots along the way. So we're purposefully failing the build in some of these places when our company is not compliant with our policies. And we're going to see through this lab some good things that you can do and some common mistakes that developers might make and how we can catch that in an automated way. So Great intro. I should just join a new company. I'm struggling to explain why policy code is the way to go to non-tech stakeholders. That's a great conversation. Good luck. Good luck with that. Feel free to reach out if you need any pointers or you want to talk things through. I would be happy to help you make that case. I feel very strongly that this is the only way that we're going to be able to scale, the only way that we're going to be able to operate our security programs in the future. This is a new environment, so a lot of these tools are nascent, and this stuff is not easy to put together. That's part of why I made this lab environment. All of the stuff that I'm showing here is open source, and if you'd like to poke around, I can give you all URLs to where that is, but everything here is 100% open source and transparent, so you can use it inside your companies to demonstrate as well if you'd like. All right, so it seems like that is all the questions and comments. I'm going to let you all go. Feel free to put any questions or issues that you're having in the chat. I am also going to run through this workshop in parallel with you. One quick bit of transparency. There was an issue this morning where 3 hours before I woke up in the middle of the night, last night, some upstream project made a breaking change and it broke our lab. I believe I've got all of that stuff fixed. This is why we pin versions. But I've got everything pinned now. I think we should be in pretty good shape. But if anyone hits any bugs, send me a message, let me know, and we can definitely work through it. All right, I'm going to jump off camera, but I will be around here for the next hour and a half. Let me know if anyone has questions or issues. My IP, that's a great question. So my IP updated from when I set my environment variable. Should I just update and rerun it? So the safest way to do that is not to update and rerun it, but instead, if you just go into EC2, and you can see these different Cloud9 servers. What did I call this one? Policy as code workshop. So we're going to find policy as code workshop. The primary thing that IP is used for is in the security groups here. So if you go checkbox, security, click the security group, and then edit the inbound rules. 2 of these are your server itself, and 2 of these are your client IP address. So the one that matches 80 and 2222 is your IP. And what you can do is just click here and do my IP, or I'm sorry, I had that wrong. 22 and 80. So just click my IP, and you can see mine isn't changing, but if your IP did change, it would change, and then you can hit save. Okay. The way that the security groups work is that they drop packets, they don't reject them. So if you see like IO timeouts or like TCP timeouts or socket timeouts or anything like that, it probably has to do with your firewall rules. So. All right, sounds good. Like I said, I will be around. Good luck, everybody, with the lab. Thanks. So I think at least a couple of you have mentioned being unable to reach the IP address and it's timing out. So that likely means that the client IP that you initially set is not the client IP that you're browsing from. So you want to make sure that your browser that you're using your host browser to access this, and you're not trying to do it inside of Code9 when you're actually looking at GitLab. So, and like I showed before, if you want to, let me see if I can share my screen again. If you go into EC2, instances, grab the server that you just made, security, and then security groups, you can edit these roles. And you could even just add a new role if you want to be really careful. Come in here and do HTTP, grab my IP, and hit save. So this won't save for me because it's redundant with this role right here. It's the same thing. But you could do that, and then you should gain access. Let me know if anyone's still having issues with that though. All right, so one question in the chat. So how are we going to access GitLab without a GitLab account? So I automatically created a GitLab account for you. And at the end of the provisioning, the last message is the GitLab account. So the root password is a GitLab root user, and the password is the GitLab root user's password. So log in with those credentials to GitLab. Yeah, thank you, Mark. I noticed that as well. And I'm gonna ship a fix for that. Yeah, so there's a little typo in the can't find it section where it says root slash, but it should be demo slash. That's what I get for trying to organize things better at the last minute. um, okay, able to create a Cloud9 environment, getting an error saying your account is blocked. That typically happens for older AWS accounts if you have like an expired credit card on your account or something like that. So um, if you think that's the case, or for whatever reason you're unable to validate your credit card, they're going to block you from creating resources. One workaround to do is just make a new account with a new credit card from scratch. That's probably the fastest way to do it. You can go in and to the billing console, modify your credit card, but it's not instant. And you probably will still have to put a support ticket in and wait, maybe 20 or 30 minutes, sometimes more, to get unblocked and get that stuff moving again. So I would recommend just making a new AWS account. I'm sorry, I know that's kind of painful. But that's typically because of an expired credit card or a missing credit card, which you shouldn't be able to make the account in the first place. But I've seen all kinds of weird things. So that's it. Okay, great. So you're all set then. Good deal. Yeah, the recording for this will be available later. Yeah, I think we typically upload it to our Sans Cloud Security YouTube. Also, here, let me just share my screen real quick. Okay. So here I am in the my johnzillo.com lab. This is a previous lab or workshop that I did on container security, and you'll see I'll actually embed that in the lab instructions. So once we get it posted, I'll put it right here at the top. And so when you get to this section, you'll actually see me doing the initial talk through and any wrap up, whatever gets posted. And this page will be around for essentially forever. I have no plans to take it down. Thanks to GitHub for the free website hosting. So you'll be able to go through this whenever you want. And whatever, if we find any little ways to tweak or improve this, it'll keep getting shipped out to this web page. So if you go to johnzillo.com, if you go to just the base, you click this. If you're here for a lab, click here. And you'll see like a list of them. Hopefully in the future, there'll be many more of these. But you go to the policy as code one, that'll pretty much always be accessible. Yep. So that one's interesting. That role shouldn't be able to save because you have two rules that are exactly the same. So I think that's a draft security group config, and it shouldn't be the entire one either. There should be two additional roles, I think, as well, that are the external IP. There's some hairpin traffic that needs to be allowed for the server to access itself. If you are doing egress filtering on network, you may need to allow some traffic out. But really it's only port 80. Port 22 isn't actually used unless you want to SSH into it. It's really just for my troubleshooting. So it's really just port 22, or I'm sorry, port 80 into the external IP of the EC2 instance. Awesome. Thank you, Randall. Yeah, just to reconfirm, you'll also be able to access the recording on the workshop registration page. And so that'll get updated. What do I do if I'm running into this error? Localhost failed, Docker compose, up detach, got a non-zero, exit code. Oh, that looks like maybe you ran the provisioning twice, because you can see at the end there it says network GitLab network is ambiguous, 2 matches found on name. So what it looks like happened is that got created twice somehow. And the error message that you're getting for GitLab.yaml is the first one that runs. There's a second one that uses the first one, but it doesn't look like you got to that point yet. The best way to try to clean that up is to run this command: user local bin docker compose file home ec2 user gitlab.yaml down. And then rerun the docker rerun. I'll give you the whole thing here. So try those 2 commands. The first one, docker compose down, essentially destroys the environment. That assumes that you haven't gotten to the GitLab runner side of it. If you have multiple terminals open, it's possible that that did happen. You have to run 2 downs instead of just 1. But if you just got to that normal 1 terminal and it failed, you can just run down, and then try the Docker run again. If you continually run into this, there's 2 options that you could follow. Because it looks like it has a naming conflict, it's possible that this was an existing server before with the same network or something like that. So just making a new environment, a new Code9 environment or Cloud9 environment would help. The other is you can manually delete that network with a docker network rm command, gitlab-network. So docker network rm, gitlab network, and then run the docker run command, and it'll try to bring everything back up. So, yep. Keep in touch. Let me know how that stuff's working for you. Yeah. So if you want to copy and paste that, I just take the old non-technical approach. I just cat the file out and then I click copy and paste it. So yeah, xclip through the browser is going to be a lot trickier. If that was like an RDP session, then it would work a lot better. But yeah, I just cat the gitlab.pub, copy and paste it in. Should be good. All right. So if you're able to wget it, but you can't hit it in the browser, I'm starting to think that there's either a browser plugin, which is less likely, or more likely some sort of a proxy that's set up in your browser that's filtering something, because the security group rules are likely correct if you can wget it, but wget, unless you have an environment variable set, isn't going to honor proxy settings that could be in the browser. Or you might have some sort of an agent on your system that's proxying traffic or anything weird like that. If you run that command that I just ran, that's just to get the password again. So if you're not getting the login page, that's not going to help you. But if anyone needs to get the root password again and don't want to keep scrolling up, you can run that entry point.log command. I just dropped that off to the side for troubleshooting. Edge is a browser, no plugin. Okay. Yeah, my current thought, is it a work computer? Is there maybe an agent on it or some sort of computer like endpoint restrictions? Computer, Windows 11 Pro. Interesting. Well, if you're curling it and you get that redirect to user sign in, that means that it is running. So all the Docker containers and networks and everything seem to be running, and the security groups are good. So I think on the server side in AWS, things are doing pretty okay. If your phone is on the same network and has the same external IP address, you could try going to that IP address, AP, whatever, from your phone, and see if you get a login page from there. Okay. Try that. Yeah, just the 2 different device thing, or another laptop or computer if you've got it. And let me know if one works but the other one doesn't, or if they both don't work. So your phone works. So you already know what I'm going to point at. I maybe I don't know why it would be Edge. I would try a different browser, maybe. Turn it off and on again, like restart your box. Yeah, yeah, I'm using Edge and was able to get in. Yeah, I don't expect it to be a browser interoperability issue. Sounds like it's like a system-based configuration of the browser or something along those lines. Yeah, try to Firefox. Yeah, that's perfect because Firefox has its own proxy settings too, so that'll be good. So I see the policy definition text what to do with it. I'm trying to get the pipeline to show a violation of the vendor name. Okay, so the pipeline, you should already have a pipeline violation of the vendor name. All of that happens very early on when you push all the different branches. So I don't have any restrictions on the pipeline, on running the pipelines. So when you push the initial commit and the 3 other branches, it just runs all those pipelines in sequence. So if you look at the policy definition, here, let me just share my screen. Okay, so here I've got a pretty clean setup, just a new terminal. I'm in the policy as code demo on the main branch, and you can see over here, I've just got like a Docker file, README, and a version, nothing really. So if you do a git checkout, you should have a couple of options here. And if we want to look at the policy for the Docker file, it's policy Docker file. Then you'll see that this policy folder popped up and we've got the Docker file.yaml. So what you saw in the lab instructions is also right here. And then if we go to the pipelines, and we can find it based on the name, right? All of these, and also we've got the branches here, feature ISC, etc. So policy Docker file, this commit, you can see it passed the first stage and then it failed. We added that big file in here in that branch. And if you click this job, go into policy, then you should get these error messages. And so you were looking for what vendor? Yeah. So label vendor is missing or has an invalid format. It currently equals John Ziola, and here's the reference. And then you can customize all of this as well. So you could say, it must be one of these things or whatever you want the message to be. So yeah, hopefully that helps. In the lab instructions, and I'm cheating here, this is my local copy. This code block right here is where that happens. So if you copy this big thing, git fetch all, a couple checkouts, and push it all, right after you do this, you see it pushed these 4 different branches. Then it runs the 4 pipelines in sequence. We've only got 1 runner on here. So it does one, it can only do 1 at a time because I didn't set any parallelism. Okay, Firefox works. Awesome. That's good. Definitely blame preview features, although I'm a big fan of preview features too. Yeah, maybe. I'm new to cloud and cloud security. Everything is working, but I don't really know what's happening. Where can I start learning from? Okay, great. Yeah, no, that's awesome. So there should be, as we go through here, a bunch of different links. For instance, go here and you open these 2 links, you're going to get these white papers, right? And if you go down, the preview is not the whole white paper, right? You have to keep hitting that more pages. But if you go up here, you can hit download and you can download that and read it. Same thing with this GRC white paper too, right? There are some other references in here. So if you click this predefined annotation keys, you can see a bunch of technical details. This might be too much for you, but this has to do with annotations and labels for containers and why we care about this stuff. And then another thing is this Docker file. So we have this file. We're saying that it's not meeting our company's expectations, but what even is this file? If you click that link, you get a whole bunch of documentation here. Now, I probably would not recommend just going through all of this documentation. That could probably be a little dry, but it is a good reference if you want to say, we've got label here, and we go over here and we look at label. We can see what label is, and we can read just that label section. Yeah. Other things that you could do to start spinning up on this, let me see. So if you're interested in spending hours reading about the output formats, I have linked tons of stuff right here. This is essentially like a scratch pad right now, right? There's tons of different links you could look at, like this code change that I just made that automatically creates OSCAL for this open source project. You can read at the OSCAL project level and read about meta schema, and it's probably going to be a bit of a fire hose, I totally admit. Some of these, though, like this one is a talk, right? So you might be able to watch this presentation and learn something about policy as code, OSCAL, and cloud native environments. There's tons of stuff in here. I kind of wanted to make sure that there was more than enough to learn from in this area. And yeah, I could start there. I would also recommend, at SANS, we have a bunch of different training classes. So there's a sans.org/sec, depending on your prior experience, there's a SEC 388, which is an intro to cloud computing and security. There's a 488, which is kind of the next level up, cloud security essentials. And the class that I teach, which is specific to these like cloud security and DevSecOps automation, is 540. So there's tons of good resources there. And then the last thing I'll say is to refer you to this 90 days of DevOps repository. So if you want to learn in a structured, bite-sized way, they've got 90 small chunks of things that you can learn. And it's extremely popular. It's got 24,000 stars. I don't know. This guy just documented his personal journey, and then people really jumped onto it. And there's tons of really good stuff here. Yeah, you can see it's kind of exploded in popularity. So you could go through here, and this is a free resource, and you can step through 90 days of small tasks. And if you go in here, you can see we've got one for each day. And if I just grab one at random, how about a different one at random? Why is this not working? Let's go back to these originals. Oh my gosh. All right, my tour is not going super well, but in this repository, I bet you if you go down here, I'll probably explain, yeah, he's got a website now. That's why he kind of changed it up and as a website. You can go through here, say day one, look at day one, look at day two, and you can step through things there. Tons of really good resources on that page. I highly recommend it. Just confirming the SSH keys generated are the ones we should be adding into GitLab. Yes. So if we go in here, the cat GitLab hub, this is the key that you should be putting in. If it doesn't say that, I should add it, but I thought, yeah, right here. We've got a public key in here. And then the SSH public key. Yep, so that's the one to put in there. Or do we need to generate per the how-to page? It's more dealer's choice. You could make your own if you wanted. I just decided to do the config, and in the config, we point to this key as well, actually this key. So you're gonna have to update your SSH config. So if you look over here, you can see it points to that. So if you're gonna make your own, you're gonna need to update this as well for your SSH-based pushes to work. So yeah, I would recommend just catting like I did here, cat that public key and then copy and paste that in. It should be good. All right, so you're trying to put what block of code in? Um, there are Git branches already for every block of code that's shown in the lab walkthrough. So you shouldn't need to bring things in, although you can. I think it depends a little bit on which branch you were on and what changes you made when you did that. If you have been merging branches in, then you're gonna have to rebase on the main branch afterwards. So what you're looking at is an older version of that. I'm gonna blame CDNs for that. That probably are sticking you with old content. It's always the CDN's fault. It's never my fault. No, I'm kidding. So yeah, so it should look like this. And this is the cheater version. But if I go to here, yeah, it looks like this. I just updated this output. Right. So this is what it should look like online. What I recommend is if you're in like Chrome or Edge or something, if you go into inspect, then you can right click the refresh button and you can do empty cache and hard reload. That is my go-to for a cache-less refresh. It used to be like Control F5 and all that great stuff, but I think this works very consistently. So I would recommend doing that and seeing if it's any better. If it's not any better, then it's a CDN is holding on to it, and I'll just give you the command to run. There's the block. But yeah, try that cache-less refresh and see if that helps you out. Good, thanks. Okay, great. So, all right, I'll still be sticking around if anyone has any questions. Okay, so what does it mean if you're not allowed to create a T3 large instance for the Cloud9 IDE? So things will get a little bit tricky. Are you able to create anything in the Cloud IDE? So if you just leave that instance type as default, does that work? In my testing, most of those predefined options can't handle actually running the server, and it will kind of crash. It has so much resource utilization for so long that the Cloud9 connection into the server stops working. And I've let it go for a couple hours and it kind of never came back. So that's why I moved us to the T3 large or T3 extra large, I think. It's just also to speed up the lab a little bit too, because we don't want to be sitting here waiting for like files to extract for an hour or anything like that. It's kind of boring. So yeah, getting like 4 vCPUs and probably like 4 or 8 gigs of RAM would probably be okay. But the 2 vCPU options, which is the biggest built-in, like if you go to the M5 large, it's only 2 vCPUs and 8 gigs of RAM. I think the CPU holds us back a lot. So you can give it a shot with something smaller. But yeah, it might not be the best experience because it won't actually be able to handle the startup. And so you'll just run a server, but never actually be able to do the lab. So if you could try other instance types, really all we care about is 4 vCPUs and at least like 8 gigs of RAM. So anything with that intersection you should be okay with. Go ahead and give that a shot if you can. Another option is you can technically do this without Cloud9. You could do this with EC2, and I did test that. If you use Amazon Linux 2023, which is a newer version than Cloud9 uses. Cloud9 uses Amazon Linux 2. But you're going to lose some of the IDE things, and you'll have to do some additional like SSH setup and things like that. Cloud9 just handles for you. It sets up the AWS command line, which you need. And you don't need SSH keys. So that's why I chose Cloud9 for this. It just simplifies a few things. Okay, so in the repo for that one, so that's why I copied it into the lab just to make things a little bit simpler. But yes, you can get to that in the repo as well. Let me just get that up and I'll do a quick walkthrough of this. Let me make sure I'm on the right branches and all this stuff. All right, so we're gonna close a few things here. So I've got a standard branch, and you can see we're on the main branch here. So that's a git checkout command. And so for this Docker file, it's going to be there by default. So you could just double click that on the left side and you can see it. In the terminal, you can just cat the Docker file and you can see it there as well. Then we go down to the policy definition. This is not there by default, right? There's going to be a separate policy folder that shows up when we check out a new branch. So we do a git checkout policy/Docker file. And when I do that, see how that some additional code changes got applied. And we've got this policy in Dockerfile YAML. And you can see here's where it is in there. And at the terminal, we can see we've created a policy directory and a Dockerfile.yaml there as well. So these different branches, different versions of history. You need to make sure that you could do it again, git checkout policy/Dockerfile. Don't have, just go back in here real quick. So the other thing you can do is this branch name of policy Dockerfile, search, and you can see the changes. And in the changes, you see that that was added. So that was added there. And then there were other things that we had to add to make this all work. So we had to bring in an image that has Dockerfile lint, and we needed to run it. So right here, we're pointing to this policy Dockerfile.yaml. And right here, we're saying assess the Docker file, which is already in the repository. One more way that you could look at this is if you go to the repository and you change your branch to policy Docker file, you can see it in here as well. So hopefully that helps a few different ways to see it. This is fun. My stop share, every time I went to click on stop share, it moved. That sounds like a thing I used to write when I was in high school for my computer science teachers. All right, I'll put that git checkout command policy Docker file. Just need to run that at the terminal. But you'll need to be, let me edit that real quick. You need to be in the environment policy as code demo directory first. Okay, so if you're getting page not found, probably not related to the git push. Sometimes SSH key scans can flag intrusion detection systems. So if you're being routed through an IDS IPS, it could be blocking your traffic because of the SSH key scan, because that can make sometimes multiple different SSH connections. So that's a possibility. The other thing you might want to do is try to run a Docker PS. So that Docker PS command in your Cloud9 terminal should look something like this. That's what we want to see. GitLab running, or runner running, and then Docker and Docker. If that's not the case, then you might have a Docker issue. So you might also if you can't do a git checkout policy doc, so you need to have a lowercase d. Sorry, that I don't think that is a caching issue. There we go. So try the lowercase d. That should work. I want to get the hello container to work without failing. So I share my screen. I guess it depends on what you mean by work without failing. So if you, from any branch, doesn't really matter, I'm in main, go to your environment policy as code demo, and you do this command, docker build -t, you just call it whatever you want, it's called example, and then period at the end. It'll build your image. And then if I do a Docker run example, it prints hello world. So the image should work without failing today, as far as like you can run it. Are you talking about like having a pipeline succeed? So if you mean, what was that Docker build command? Let me just do this cd environment. So if you do all 4 of those commands, it should jump into the directory, build it, and then run it. So if I run those commands, it'll look something like this. So, and then this last hello world, was it working? So that's one part of it, but another, I don't have this open, so let me just open mine. And so what you might be referring to is, let me remove this, are these failures here. So you could fix this infrastructure as code and push a commit, and then get this to pass. You could change the Docker file policy, push it, and get it to pass. So if you go in here and see what's the policy, so the vendor needs to be capital E example, and that's it. Can't be anything else. The website needs to be https example.com, and this http example.com/demo needs to be the source. I think those were the 3 failures. So this is the policy. So if we make the code comply with that policy, which I can try to do, I'll try to do it in the web IDE so you can all see it. So if I go over here and I change this to example, I change this to example.com, and I change this to example.com/demo. Let's see, did I line that up properly? Let me just review my policy again. So the vendor's example, The web URL is https example.com, so we're good there. And then this source is http://example.com/demo/. So it needs to be /demo/something. So we'll just do policy as code demo. So I did that. And then you go over here to source control. I can commit. Let's make a new branch. Demo. All right, that change has been committed. So if I go back over to here and if we cross our fingers, all right, so that's not going to be exactly what we wanted. So I updated that file and it is compliant now, but it's not actually running the policy checks because you'll see it doesn't have a policy stage. So I just need to add the policy checks on top. So I need to take what changes are here and bring them over to there. I'm thinking the easiest way to do that, that's not very confusing, would be to go back to the repository. Where did that? Oh, that commit happened over here in demo. I see. So I can open a merge request then, and I'm going to add my changes over top of the policy Docker file branch. So we're going to see if this will let us do it. Looks like it will. We're just making these couple changes. So this is the diff. And we're going to merge it in. Let's approve it, merge it in. And now we've got pipeline 6 running. So we're going to build and run the policy check. And if everything worked, this should get a green check. The policy should pass. So let's just watch it live. There we go. Job succeeded. So if I go back to this pipeline here, I've now fixed the policy issue, right? Oops. Here is the fix. And now we're compliant. Now we're following what we wanted to. What I'll probably do is just add that into the lab as well. That's fun. A little off-roading there. Hmm? Yeah, no, for sure. All right. I think my GitLab is messed up. I looked at the initial commit and there's only one branch with 4 files. Yeah, so you looked at the initial commit on main. So looking at this, there's only the 4 files. This is exactly what you should see. What's the best way to get a fresh container running? So if you want to redo the whole environment, you can just go through the getting started phase. If you want to destroy and recreate your environment, there's only 3 real steps. I would not recommend doing this unless you want to throw everything away and wait another 15 minutes. But so if you go back to your home directory, you can do a docker compose -f runner down. Then I'm not going to actually run these myself, but then you can do a docker compose -f GitLab down. Then you could do an rm rf GitLab in your home directory. So this command, that command, and that command blows away all of the GitLab stuff. Then if you do the docker run, that whole big thing, it'll skip a lot of the pre-provisioning steps and then it'll make your new instance. So rerun the docker composes and all that stuff. So if you really want to start over from scratch, that's the way to do it. Found the issue, I think, from what I just went over. All right, awesome. Good. Still the same outcome. All right, so you're on main. You can't check out. All right, so this is going to be a little bit more complicated. But, okay. I'm going to just send you a bunch of commands. Git remote add, GitHub. So this is actually just on GitHub. This whole thing is just on GitHub, and we're just cloning it down and pushing it into GitLab. So that we have it in kind of a constrained environment, and so you don't have to deal with validating email addresses and getting GitHub set up and setting up multi-factor and all that crazy stuff, right? So if you do a git remote add, git pull, GitHub policy Docker file, git checkout policy Docker file. Those commands should be pretty foolproof. You might hit some merge issues or rebase issues or something like that, but go ahead and try those. Oh, actually, let's make sure you're in the right directory. So cd environment policy is demo. All right, so try those 4 commands. Let me know how that works. So export the external IP. Yep. Echo. This is putting the commit into root. However, the URL is actually. Oh yeah, thank you. That is a typo. And I'm gonna fix that. Yeah, you're exactly right. So yeah, that is correct. Thank you. Okay, it's 1:10. We're gonna give it another 10 minutes, say, to let everybody keep working through the lab. And again, this lab will be up for essentially forever. You can work on it whenever we want. We're gonna come back and we're gonna do a quick walkthrough at 1:20, in about 9 minutes. So hang around for that. Let me know if you have any other issues for the lab. All right. So that's about 1:20. We're getting to the end of the workshop. Let me share my screen again. Thanks everybody for coming out. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope you learned something. This is going to stay up at johnziola.com/workshop, or the full URL. That just goes to the most recent workshop that I've done. Feel free to keep the conversation up in the Cloud Discord. I will be checking in periodically to that as well. Also, feel free to send me a message anywhere else. So if you enjoyed what you saw today, just a quick note about the SANS Cloud Security curriculum. We've built this career progression page, which I really like. If you are interested in maturing your skills as an analyst, as a manager, as an architect, these columns are those different job roles, and then the rows are the different classes that we would recommend. So if you are like me, you are a hands-on builder. I like these engineering classes right here. These are definitely my favorite. You can find the 540 class that I teach right here, intersecting DevOps professionals, architects, and engineers. But there's all kinds of different classes out there, our core curriculum, specializations, leadership area, etc. So feel free to snag a picture of this if you're interested in taking a couple of SANS classes. This will help you figure out which is the right one. We've also recently put together some Cloud ACE journeys, so these different triads. If you are interested in being a cloud security analyst, architect, DevOps engineer, etc., here are the 3 highest priority classes that we would recommend taking. So you can see in DevSecOps, we've got 540, 510, and 522, and we've got 540 and a bunch of other places as well, right here, right? So that is going to be the closest to what we did today, where you're doing kind of DevOps, DevSecOps like classes and training. So specifically, if you want to do Sec 540, the Cloud Security and DevSecOps automation, where we're going to do way more labs and way more hands-on than we were able to do today. Think 5 full days of a fire hose, kind of 9 a.m. to 5 p.m., sometimes as late as 7 p.m. Depending, we've got a few teachers coming up. So if you like the flexibility of watching recordings of the talks, Eric Johnson has our on-demand classes. We're going to have a live online class in the end of January with Ahmed. And if you're going to be if you'd like to go in person, we've got the next classes in December 11 through 15 at CDI, Cloud Defense Initiative with David. So a bunch of different times that this class is going to be taught and available. For me, the next time I'm going to be teaching it is in New Orleans in the end of February. So if you're interested in joining me down in New Orleans, that'll be a good time. So I'll be covering this. And there is also a certification. So if you take the class, enjoy it, and want to show others that you've learned a lot, you could take the certification. It's becoming a very popular one. Similarly, we've got other hands-on workshops. So we're doing these very regularly. We've got building better detections with Sean, least privilege with Ryan. So here, if you're interested in more of these, take a look. And if you just go to sans.org/workshops, you can see a broader look of the SANS workshops. These are our cloud security ones that are coming up on November 16th and January 17th. So that is it for the workshop today. I'm going to hang around until 1:30 or a little bit later, but thank you everybody for coming out. My name is John Ziola. Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn or shoot me an email with either of those emails. That QR code is not malicious, I promise. That'll just take you to my LinkedIn, but I would really, really welcome any feature requests or opportunities for me to improve the labs that I've done or the workshops that I've done. This one or any of the other ones. And if you just want to say, oh, it didn't go deep enough or it was too deep, I'd like things to be a little bit more high level. I'm very, very interested and open to that. I think one of the other labs that I've done is Container Security 101. And my plan for that is I'm going to break it into a 101, 201, 301, and a 401 class, because we had a whole bunch of people show up to that one. And that was essentially the feedback, is that some people really liked the intermediate or the introduction, and some people wanted it to go way deeper. And so I'm going to essentially build out all 4 of those levels, from introduction to cloud container security all the way down to handcrafting containers from scratch using direct Linux system calls. I'm going to be building all of those over the next 6 to 12 months. And so if you want to give me other thoughts or feedback, you want there to be a deeper policy as code conversation or more content or something else on the container security, anything cloud or cloud native security, I'm in love with. And especially policy as code is a place close to my heart. So feel free to send me any of that feedback, and I can definitely consider it for a future workshops. So, all right. Well, thanks everybody for coming out. Give you a few minutes back to get back into the swing of things. Hope you all have a great day. So, cool. Thank you.